Welcome back to the show, and today it's a story that's quite close to my gaming heart because, well, Creative Assembly. They got it wrong with Total War Warhammer 3, and now they are trying to fix their mistakes. They've recently issued the first concrete look at what those fixes are actually going to look like. They are setting expectations for future content, and they are confirming that audience feedback is being listened to. Now, this also comes alongside an admission that stakeholder interests mean they can't deliver everything that audiences hoped for. That's quite a statement in and of itself. And of course, we've got the looming threat of Sega's corporate influence on these teams who are trying to fix what went wrong, trying to fix, ultimately, problems created by decision makers, in many cases quite high up and removed from them, which I even know from the many people who reached out to, the likes of Voland, I believe Legend as well. Also, of course, a decent few people in my inbox sort of educating me on their perspective of what was going on at the company. So that's what we're going to get into today, and to protect us as well from choppy waters, well, here's today's sponsor. Okay, you can make your own line go up by learning fascinating and high-paying new skills with, of course, brilliant.org/Bellular News, where if you click that link, the first 200 of you to click it will get 20% off the annual plan and a 30-day free trial. Now, Brilliant is an absolutely awesome platform about interactively breaking down big problems into smaller ones that are easier to understand with their bite-sized quiz-based learning format, which is available across their app and the web. It all just works super slick, super nice. They've got a lovely design language, and what I'd recommend to you today is based on my own experience where, look, I do deeply value being rooted in the fundamentals of computer science. That's a lot of my education, and it's something that you can learn with Brilliant, where you can start with the fundamentals of computer science, which is a 3-part course that will build your skills and build your confidence. Now, speaking personally, I've always found the logic-ish stuff fairly easy, but my maths is not quite as strong. So I appreciate how their quiz at the start actually tailors things to your level of maths comfort. You see, Brilliant overall, it is self-paced, it's designed to meet you where you are at, and with thousands of lessons, more being added every month, they absolutely have the material to fit you. Look, I just think it's a terrific product with a terrific mission, so you can go and check them out, where the first 200 to click my link at brilliant.org/Bellular News will get 20% off an annual plan and, of course, a 30-day free trial, which is more than enough time for you to just go at it and absolutely sample everything that they've got. It's a really good time, so check them out. Brilliant way to support the show, and a brilliant way to support yourself as well. Okay then, this flurry of communication from CA comes ahead of the 4.2 patch of Warhammer 3. The game director, Richard Aldridge, basically just went right out and said it. He said, "I'll cut straight to it. We didn't give you enough new characters and units to play with at the original release of Shadows of Change. We believe we can put this right for you, having listened to your feedback these past months to provide you with better and more varied options for your armies." Of course, if you're not aware there, they would essentially have kind of big race packs and then smaller lord packs, I suppose would be the way to put it, where the pricing of Shadows of Change was essentially the same as one tier of DLC up. So people very much were thinking, hang on, this is something that must take, 30% of the development time of that other thing, but you're charging the higher amount of money, and that did not feel fair, especially amidst a broader backdrop of Warhammer 3 being a game that had some serious misfires. I mean, in some of, the reporting from others, speaking to one of my sources, very much an issue where core design decisions with this game, basically people knew they were very flawed from the start, but leadership didn't really listen, and that then led to, honestly, the whole kind of mess that was the launch of this game and the struggle to actually get Immortal Empires, which is the sort of grand unification of all 3 game maps into one, to actually get that going. So this from Richard is an admission of fault. He's saying it's driven by player feedback. It undoubtedly is, and they apparently want to make this better. So he went on to, in writing, confirm a number of things that they're going to be doing. So, number 1, they plan to make more DLCs, including ones in the Shadows of Change model where 3 factions are getting updates. But in particular, they've went into the actual numbers here and the details and what the structure is going to be for these future DLCs. This is a notable change. It is a walkback from a position that was described to us by, by people in the know in my email inbox, saying that Shadows of Change was absolutely a part of a broader drive to do more with less at the company, basically making DLCs that were inherently more efficient to produce, with that coinciding with, wide line updates to the costs of DLC. Basically, right? Shrinkflation. They were trying to do a shrinkflation. We all then noticed shrinkflation because it's really clear when you're getting less for more, and now that is kind of being reversed, where we basically have them coming out here with the comparison chart. So at launch, right, Shadows of Change was 3 legendary lords, 1 hero, 1 lords, 1 hero, 10 units, 9 regiments of renown, 0 lores, and 1 free LC, whereas updated, right, we're getting 2 more legendary heroes, 2 more lords, 2 more heroes, 6 more units, we are getting 1 magic lore, and we are getting 1 more free LC. That's fairly good, and as they say, yes, this is 14 new pieces of content. So, the new numbers here, the updated numbers, these reflect the base expectations for what a Total War Warhammer DLC at the scale of Shadows of Change, this includes the upcoming Throne of Decay. Basically, this is the baseline for what those should actually look like. Now, he goes on to say in the article, this, we hope, allows you to lead thematic armies that are better connected to the legendary lords in the DLC, add both lower tier troops and big centerpiece monsters, and start to fill out some of the gaps and needs of the races in the game that you have asked for. And in line with my very first experience playing an Immortal Empires campaign in Warhammer 3, well, Cathay, where it is going to be getting some updates, which very much is good, and I think very much is needed. Their unit roster didn't feel particularly well rounded out to me. So that is good, but you can clearly see in this communication, I don't want to say like fear, but I think an acknowledgement that it is a pretty, thin ice situation, and I think some more work does need to be done to get the community back on board. This is what he said. The team are still working flat out to have everything ready for release, but we want to be upfront with you that there is a chance that our intended date could shift slightly. This is the true nature of video game development, in spotting those last minute issues or adding that final polish which can lead to release dates changing. It's important for all of us that, 4.2 is right, and they just say it's not going to be rushed out before it's ready. That is absolutely good. It's a good expectation to set, and it's not a lie. That is true. Sometimes, right, a known unknown is a sort of like, a problem that you don't quite know it, but you sort of can expect it's going to be there, and yeah, you can kind of timeline that in. Now, even at the best of times, having accurate estimations of how long it takes to actually do something, that can be pretty challenging. I think we've all set a pretty ambitious task list in the morning, or maybe even set what we thought is a reasonable task list, and then somehow the day has just sailed by. That's one thing. The other side, though, is, well, when stuff breaks for a fairly unintuitive reason. As an example, when we, I think, moved a bit too quick to fix a launch bug with our game, The Pale Beyond, well, fixing that bug, well, it did sort of fix the bug, but it fundamentally broke how gamepads felt for the game. That was a major, major problem. Yeah, certainly a regret. Just one of those things. You need to expect the unexpectable. Let me know if you also recognize what movie that quote is from. So going forward then, this is their dedicated format for these DLCs. They have now made a commitment to players. They have actually went by the numbers what people can expect, and they're saying that this feedback has been listened to, and overall I think this is definitely a move in the right direction. And also, telling us in advance is fairly useful, because one of the really strange things with Shadows of Change, it wasn't just that there wasn't enough content in it, it wasn't just that it was a bad value, it's that it wasn't really clear what players would be getting until after they could purchase. But now that is not something that should be happening going forwards, because the baseline expectation has been set. Thing is, though, this is not a heroic victory. This is not perfect. There are some unfortunate realities. There is some context that can actually, sometimes be a little bit of a challenge. So this is what they said. Not all ideas and requests are possible. The era of Karl Franz is, as you've come to expect, a rich and exciting setting for Total War, as we work closely with the Warhammer studio to ensure that content for this era is as faithfully represented in their games as is possible. Now, the reason why this is interesting, okay, to root it in video games, it's a bit tied to Vermintide. So basically Vermintide is like essentially the end time setting of this kind of like old world. Then Age of Sigmar happened. Some people love Age of Sigmar. It definitely had a rocky launch. I think it did pick itself up, but now they are essentially reintroducing the old world Warhammer fantasy setting back in. So some of that is kind of obvious here. There is specific mention of not including more Hagmother generic lords or any differences between the various different Kislev sub-factions and a few things like that. Like even say the visual detail of adding beaks to Sangors. Now, why is this? The implication is very much license holder says no / license holder says not right now. And you see, the reason there is Cathay and Kislev in particular are actually two factions that Games Workshop is working on very heavily for a future model range as a part of their update to the old world setting. So you do have an interesting situation with two very major stakeholders, both actually working on this setting as the IP holder is actually trying to, fill it out a bit more and essentially relaunch the old world. Now, one cool part of that collaboration has been the big terracotta dudes, which are coming into the game. That was basically announced as a sort of overt collaboration between the two. So a big terracotta monster dude that I can put in my armies. I am certainly very happy with that. However, of course, we just do have that interesting situation where, technically speaking, the old world and the time era of Total War Warhammer 3, they're slightly different, and you can see that there's interesting interplay between these parties, as essentially they don't want their work to trample over each other, and they don't want essentially inconsistencies that could be a bit sort of confusing or muddying for the brand. So that's the stuff with Games Workshop, but of course CA are owned by Sega, and well, Sega in fact issued a financial warning, and in their financial warning they directly named Total War Pharaoh relating to sluggish sales. Here's what they say: in the consumer area, although we released some new titles in Q3, including Sonic Superstars, Endless Dungeon, and Total War Pharaoh, sales went sluggish during the holiday sales season. Yeah, I mean, look, Total War Pharaoh, it of course was launched at the price of a full fat historical Total War, whereas really it was the scale of a Saga game. That didn't go well. They reduced the price. I found out about that because I woke up and noticed I'd been partially refunded automatically in Steam. So the price went down, then they do holiday sales and that sort of thing, and even with that, they're not really picking up sales for Pharaoh. Now, in their investor report, they confirmed that they have not yet finished the restructuring of their European businesses. This is one of the things that worried people. There were obviously in recent history layoffs from CA. So if you are kind of worrying about literally shrinkflation happening in your games, well, it's quite tricky because the softer financial performance leads to cuts, right? And it's the sort of thing where even if Creative Assembly was doing well, it could be that other units in the business are dragging the whole thing down even more, but CA could still suffer. A great example of that is what's going on with Insomniac Games, where we saw those leaked slides. Remember the Insomniac hack? And in those slides, we saw their CEO talking about the impact of bigger reductions going on at Sony. And that's very much a thing where they are one of Sony's most important studios. They have been consistently pumping out unambiguous success with amazing critical reception, but because of the wider financial whims of the group, they would have to suffer. And in one of those slides, the CEO just talks about the sorts of cuts that would be made in that scenario, and I suppose how they would be quite painful. So certainly if you love Total War, as I do, and you're looking at this situation and you're thinking, right, we want to spend money in Total War Warhammer 3, we just want the deal to feel fair and to feel reasonable. I also want to spend money on historical Total War games. But as a historical Total War fan first, I mean, I've been playing those since Rome 1. It doesn't look particularly bright, and the things that they've said, haven't made me feel more confidence there. I mean, from what I understand, or at least have been led to believe, the sort of the grand idea of a medieval 3 is not necessarily the sort of thing that we should be holding our breath for, which is a bit rough. And just to go into what Sega themselves had said, continue to consider structural reform measures for the consumer business in the European region. 1, review of medium-term lineup. So that could be if there's a game that's going to come out maybe 1.5, 2 years, but it still does need significant production to actually finish it, that game could die because it's not a guaranteed win. We've seen Embracer Group do the very same thing, and as an example, that has meant, at least for now, the death of Deus Ex, which is kind of tragic. The optimization, they say, of fixed expenses, improvement of investment, efficiency, and a review of development and sales structure and management system. So ultimately then, Shadows of Change are a win for audiences, but there's potentially change at Sega that, the shadow of which is going to be blocking out, well, I mean, inherently it's a goddamn shadow, it's blocking out the sun. You know what I mean? If you're actually just trying to do your best at Creative Assembly, you've probably had years of maybe management not being well, aligned with your players. You've had layoffs, you've had corporate BS coming from Sega, you've had industry-wide layoffs, and now reading something like this from the owner of your company, you're certainly going to be working in a bit of a state of fear. If the damage has been done, or at least if damage has been done that will be a medium-term thing to solve, we can see a corporation like Sega decide to cut their losses early before the fans are properly won back, You're going to get some people with Shadows of Change. And you're going to get some more people, the new sort of update Shadows of Change. Throne of Decay, you're going to get some more people. But it's a journey, it's a process. And if that process isn't fast enough for Sega, obviously, that's when we start to be properly worried, because a lot of these companies, they are not above what an onlooker would say is cutting their nose to spite their face. Just take a look at the recent story with Paradox, where, I've forgotten the name of the game. It's the one that, would make you think it's like Sims, but it's actually a larger town simulation, where that's been delayed pretty substantially, I think 3 months again from where it was supposed to launch after another delay. But that's obviously happened in light of the, good, but I think softer than it could have been performance of City Skylines 2. And looking at City Skylines 2, you look at that and think, why the hell did you launch that when you did? It was clearly not ready. Any player who plays the game knows that game is not ready. And I mean, maybe they had some bad financials from the write-off of the Lamplighters League, but that's no good reason to steal loads of your future performance, try to have some of it now, but at the cost of overall net reducing your overall future performance. I mean, it seems crazy to me, the amount of short-termism that goes on in this industry. I would just certainly wonder. Here it's a situation where I think this fan base can be won back. I think it is possible, but I absolutely worry that Sega will, kill this in the cradle. Okay, what do you think? Let me know. That's it for today's video. A big thanks, of course, to our sponsor for supporting the show. With that said, well, you can check out this video that will replace me next, and I'll be back tomorrow because, hell yeah, we're pretty much daily now.